Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure to welcome all of you to participate in today's CalPlug's Earth Day workshop. My name is GP Lee. GP stands for Good Person. When we make our Mother Earth a great planet, we all become great persons. We are all here to do our job. As a loyal citizen of the planet, it is our responsibility to make our planet great again. While the world leaders today are discussing the action plan as a top-down approach, we, as a loyal citizens, will take action from bottom up. When we all meet together from the top down and bottom up, we will be able to transform our Mother Earth into a great planet. I want to thank you to allow us to share the opinions, share our idea, and take action together. So at this time, I want to first thank all the audience who attend today's events for allowing us to exchange ideas with you and get your feedbacks. Secondly, I want to thank today's speakers, our distinguished speakers, for really projecting their ideas and share with us. And lastly, I want to thank all the CalPlug and CalIT2 staff members who put this event together. Without their efforts, I won't be here to speak to you. So as a reminder for today's program, because you are all muted, if you have a question about everyone's presentation, at the end of presentation, I will repeat your question. So the way we could do is during the presentation, if you have any question come up, please send the message through the chat box. I will receive the message from our staff. I will read out your question to the speakers. So this is the logistics side. So in today's program, I would like to start with introducing two co-chair of a CalPlug advisory board. The first one is Dr. Kim Trenbath. Kim is the lead for the NREL Plug and Process Low Technology Research Team at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado. She leads Building Science Research Team in System Technology. While she earned a degree in atmospheric science, she researched climate change and indoor air qualities. And our co-chair of the advisory board in CalPlug is Mr. Doug Johnson. Mr. Johnson is responsible for public policy issues affecting product developments, operation, sales, and marketing across the consumer technology industry. He advocates for the technology sector before regulators and legislators at the local, national, and international level on issues such as energy efficiency, regulatory reform, in-flight technology use, and policy concerning the operation of consumer and commercial drone. So it is my great pleasure to invite the co-chair, Kim. Kim, please take it away.
Thanks, GP. I'm going to pass it over to Doug, who will speak first.
Okay.
Thank you, GP, and thank you, Kim, for the introduction. As GP mentioned, I am Vice President of Technology Policy for the Consumer Technology Association. I oversee our energy efficiency activities and initiatives, which are pretty comprehensive nowadays. It's a pleasure to serve with Kim as co-chair of CalPlug's advisory board. My organization, CTA, represents a $422 billion industry, which supports more than 18 million US jobs. And at CTA, we say that technology is about changing people's lives for the better. And this concept is manifest in the products and services our members design, make, and sell. It's true for the consumer technology products of the past, and it's also true for the new and exciting technology of the future, including AI and drones, self-driving vehicles, digital health, robotics, and smart home and 5G. Over the years and decades, we have seen consumer tech products become more environmentally sustainable in how they are made, used, and handled at the end of life. And as an organization, we work with our members in efforts concerning product packaging, chemicals, materials use, recycling, greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and of course, energy efficiency. We have taken a comprehensive approach to addressing these topics through public policy advocacy, setting industry standards, doing consumer education initiatives, conducting research and analysis on our industry's products and their energy use, and of course, hosting events and conferences such as our own CES trade show. CTA's involvement in CalPlug goes back almost to the very beginning. For many years, we've been a supporter of CalPlug. Our member companies, in some cases, have worked with CalPlug on specific projects in particular product categories in our industry. The other day, I looked back at CalPlug's April 2010 workshop or conference, which was called Planning Workshop for a New California Plug Load Energy Efficiency Center. That was 11 years ago. I looked at the agenda from way back then, which I still have in my computer, and the event description included phrases such as bring together, seek input, understand, help. And over the years, that is in fact what CalPlug has done. CalPlug has brought stakeholders together. CalPlug has gathered input on energy efficiency challenges. CalPlug staff have sought to understand technical and economic issues in this space. And CalPlug has also tried to help with tools and potential solutions to challenges related to plug load and energy efficiency. Now we look forward to CalPlug in the 2020s, and I want to highlight something in CalPlug's organizational documents. There's a phrase, cross-disciplinary collaboration in CalPlug's mission statement. Certainly bringing together various parties and perspectives can expedite solutions and also foster creative approaches to solving problems. We know that good things can happen through public and private sector collaboration, and even just within the private sector, we have experienced this with our energy efficiency voluntary agreements. As CalPlug has pursued its mission and organizational objectives, it's great to see CalPlug making connections internationally as well. CalPlug has shared its expertise and research findings at conferences which have brought together the international energy efficiency community. And I believe this also helps to elevate CalPlug's status and work, the benefits of which, of course, are not limited by geography. I'd like to close these brief opening remarks with a note on innovation. Innovation is certainly at the heart of my industry, of the consumer technology industry. Innovation also drives energy efficiency. I noted earlier that technology is about changing people's lives for the better, and in a broad sense, so is energy efficiency. Through the work of CalPlug, its many partners, today's presenters, and indeed other stakeholders participating today and going forward, we can all support an advance in energy efficiency future as we continue to grow and innovate. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug. So I'm going to say a few words as co-chair for the advisory board. So I'm Dr. Kim Trenbath. I am the lead for systems technology research and development at NREL. I'm specifically in the Building Technologies and Science Center. And one of the projects that is in my portfolio is a project that is sponsored by the US Department of Energy, Commercial Buildings Integration, Better Buildings Alliance, Plug and Process Loads Technology Research Team. So this is the BBA PPL for Plug and Process Loads TRT for Technology Research Team, and I'm the lead for that. And I've been working on this team for about 5 years. I've been on at NREL for about 8 years. And CalPlug has always been a part of this team. They are part of our strategic working group. It's a group of researchers that come together to talk about the latest and greatest in plug load research. And CalPlug has presented in the past 3 years on 2 of our webinars. Dr. Joy Pixley presented. So NREL is really pleased to have this relationship with CalPlug because we connect the research that's being done with CalPlug with the research that we're doing at NREL. And NREL, I must say, is a federally funded research and development center of the U.S. Department of Energy. So we are a national laboratory. And what's unique about us is that we are the national laboratory for USDOE that's dedicated to energy efficiency and renewable energy. So everything that we do rolls up into EE and renewable energy. And so we're pleased to have CalPlug collaborating with us. I want to bring your attention to a draft organizational goal for CalPlug that's in their draft for the next 10 years. And it's to elevate CalPlug as the premier center for policy, technology, and device-focused energy research that advances best practices related to plug loads and related energy fields affecting our environment and future. And I think this is very relevant. CalPlug has been the premier plug load research institution in the United States for the past 10 years. And it's evidence because plug load is in CalPlug's name. So you can't really get away from plug loads. You're committed to doing it. And so CalPlug does a great job of integrating research on both the social science side and the technology side, plus forwarding that research into market transformation that's needed to shape the energy landscape. And so what I mean by this is that CalPlug has got the technical, the electrical engineering research in-house, and also the social science, the behavioral research in-house. And plug loads are similar. Plug load technology requires both engineering controls to get energy efficiency and make these technologies more grid interactive. Plus, it requires a behavioral aspect as well. And I think CalPlug has really hit it out of the park with the combination of this mixed methods research. So in addition, CalPlug is at the University of California at Irvine. And I want to bring everyone's attention to that. CalPlug reaches students. So the students work in the research labs at CalPlug, and we have technical research as well as behavioral research going on. And one thing that's helpful about that is that no matter where those students go, they graduate, they get a job in technology, they're always going to understand the energy efficiency needs of devices. No matter if they work for a manufacturer or if they work for policy, they understand that they will understand what is needed for these devices to become more efficient, what is needed for devices to be grid interactive. So I think that's a really strong suit of CalPlugs, is that they are contributing to the next generation, and these students are going to graduate and work in industry, and maybe not in the plug load area, but that no matter what they do, they will be able to bring their expertise to their colleagues. And finally, I want to say that DOE has just started to really focus on zero carbon buildings. And that is something that CalPlug has been working on as being in the state of California. They've been working on this for years. So now it's time to merge their goals with take their knowledge, what they've been working on, and expand it across the nation so that we can get better control over our plug loads and also keep our building spaces and our devices comfortable and helpful to the occupants. So with that, I thank you very much. Thank you to the presenters, and thank you to my colleagues on the advisory board. Thank you to GP and his team, and I'll turn it over to GP.
Thank you, Kim and Doug, for your outstanding remark and really get us excited, inspired, and moving forward. So at this time, I want to move to the first speaker. Dave Jacob. Dave is the Director of Efficiency Solution for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, LADWP. David oversees all aspects of LADWP's offering and strategies designed to overcome market barrier to the comprehensive adoption of energy efficiency by LADWP's customers. Dave, thank you for your presentation. Please take it away.
Thank you, GP. Thanks so much. And thanks to the great introduction from Doug and Kim. I'll be talking a little bit about efforts we have underway with both of their organizations. Happy Earth Day, everyone. And what I'm going to talk about is LA's Lacrette's Innovation Campus and our Clean Tech Incubator. And I'll lead off with how those support LA's very aggressive goals. Very quickly, I'll be going through those campus goals, and they're all around LA's Green New Deal targets. I'll give you a sense of what those are. Very aggressive, very forward-thinking and progressive goals that we've set for the city across a variety of sustainability factors. LA 100, which is where Kim's organization, NREL, comes in, National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We work with them to develop a very detailed, best-in-class, kind of first of its level in the United States in terms of how we get to 100% clean grid. Then I'll give an overview of the campus itself, the technologies, as well as the Clean Tech Incubator, how that works, and the partnership with LADWP. And finally, I'll take you through some of the exhibits we have there, just to give you a flavor of the scope of the efforts we have underway in terms of energy efficiency, but also water conservation, microgrids, and customer engagement. Okay, so starting out, just a sample of how aggressive the Green New Deal targets LA has set are. Electrifying all buses by 2030, diverting 100% of waste from landfills by 2050, sourcing 70% of all water locally by 2035, and recycling 100% of wastewater by the same year, 2035. Now, this 100% renewable energy by 2045, that's mandated by SB 100, but we're actually being more aggressive than that, as you'll see in the LA 100 study scenarios that I'll very briefly give you a high-level overview of, and how we've settled on 2035 as our target for that. 100% net zero by 2050, and a near-term goal to plant 90,000 trees by this year. And of course, what we see all that wrapping up into is creating 400,000 green jobs by 2050. This is very, very detailed. I will not go into this in any level of detail, but this is the scenario analysis that we did, that NREL did for us through the LA 100 study. And the idea was that we would look at various scenarios of energy efficiency, of electrification, and of aggressive decarbonization. And what we did was compare those various scenarios along multiple dimensions, which are what the columns are here. Look at the overall carbon reductions and the anticipated costs, as well as avoided costs from health impacts of these various scenarios. And we settled on, well, we will likely follow something very close to the SB 100 high scenario, which achieves the regulatory requirements of SB 100 10 years early, and has a heavy emphasis on energy efficiency as the lowest cost and first in the loading order resource to help us achieve these targets. One of the key things here as a cost driver is balancing out the intermittency of renewables versus reliability needs. Of course, keeping the lights on and the power flowing when the solar's off, and when the sun sets and the wind isn't blowing. So, obviously storage, massive utility and distributed energy resource storage will be a big part of that, but energy efficiency can help make all that stuff smaller. That's the key, and that's why energy efficiency will be a key part of achieving our SB 100 targets and our LA Green New Deal targets. Okay, so the facility itself, apologies, I'm going to move this. Okay, sorry about that. So just to give you a brief overview of the facility, it's 3.2 acres with 60,000 square feet. Now we own the building, and we were the developer for this project. But the key thing is it's about 2/3 of it is dedicated to the clean tech incubator, which I'll cover next. And then the rest of it is our energy efficiency labs, customer engagement. There's a training center with classroom space that we use well, pre-COVID and post-COVID, we use all the time for training, and also the community is welcome to reserve it as well. And we have our test laboratories, and we also have a 175 kilowatt solar array all over the parking area and a microgrid. This was established originally under Mayor Villaraigosa, but carried to total fruition by current Mayor Eric Garcetti. We also had some funding from the city, from DOE, from the California Energy Commission, and this is important, and I'll get to this when we talk about the incubator here in a bit. Corporate sponsors and philanthropic support. We have a lot of partners, tons of industry partners, and they really helped us bring this to fruition by, in a lot of cases, donating equipment, whether it was displays or portions of the microgrid or the gray water system. A lot of folks really saw the opportunity to demonstrate, get implementations of these new technologies and use that to obviously help open up the market. So that was a really positive public-private partnership aspect to the development of the incubator. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the incubator itself and how this is a very innovative effort among incubators. So typically an incubator, a tech incubator, is attached to either a university or venture capital of some sort. Wells Fargo has a tech incubator. Stanford has a tech incubator. We're very unique in that we are attached, our incubator is attached to utility. And I think we're certainly the first to do that type of partnership to this level. And what's really unique about that is we don't necessarily bring capital or the heavy R&D, because this isn't an R&D incubator. This is more of a commercialization incubator. And so the utility, what we bring is markets, both our own system, which is vast. We're an enormous utility. We're the third largest electric utility in the state. We're bigger than San Diego Gas and Electric. So there's our infrastructure, both on the electric and the water side. But there's also the connection to our customers through our energy efficiency and water conservation programs. And so here's what I call the virtuous cycle, in that companies have a product or a technology. Generally, Lacey does not, the LA Clean Tech Incubator does not bring in clean sheet companies. They have to have a product of some sort already pretty far along. It doesn't have to be certified or quite production ready, but they have to have something. We're not starting with ideas, we're starting with something that's already been half baked anyway. And so the incubator helps that advance, and there's support for how they get the UL listing, how they get other certifications that they need. There's a prototyping laboratory to help them really optimize the product and get it production ready. And there's a lot of support on the business side of how to turn this idea, this technology, this product into an actual business. And so then we have, because we're involved with, and we're very closely, in fact, my entire engineering team is based at the La Cretz campus. We can assess these products and how much they save and build them into our incentive programs and get a quick adoption starting through our incentives. And then we also, because we're running these energy efficiency programs as a resource, we have to very closely track whether they're actually saving, these measures are actually saving what we think they are, so we can count on them as we make power system decisions and resource decisions there. So we do a lot of what we call evaluation, measurement, and verification. And this is where we can see if the products are actually, those measures are actually giving us the savings, us and our customers, the savings we're expecting. That can then be fed back in to the next generation of those products. And that's the virtuous cycle I mentioned at the outset of this slide. And so that way we get continuous improvement of the products, and we get them deeper and deeper into the market and established in our incentive programs as well. The other slide, this is, I think Edwin's going to recognize this one. This is a very, very old, goes back a long ways, but basically, and I won't go through it in heavy detail, but it's the adoption curve for a new measure or new technology. And the point is that there's this little piece over here called the chasm, and that's where without some type of external assistance, typically through incentive programs, a product can start to take off but never quite get there and never really get to full adoption. So here's a sampling, and this is just a sample. There's over 100 companies that are part of Lacey, but here's a sample just to give you an idea of the scope. There's a smart meter company, lighting, performance lighting actually, Hive, meaning stage lighting and other very specific applications. The Move, which is EV chargers that are linked together and very tightly controlled in terms of how the charging works with the cars. Graywater, we're looking at algae-based desalination. There's also mobile EV chargers. There's also Pick My Solar, which helps customers quickly assess and obtain competing bids from solar installers to ease that process. And that's just a smattering. I mean, we have electric bikes and other lighting applications, HVAC applications, evaporative cooling companies. So there's a very broad array. I welcome everybody once the COVID crisis passes, which is hopefully fairly soon, to come visit. Before COVID, we were putting about 30,000 people a year were coming through the facility. A lot of schools as well. We work closely with LAUSD. And NREL, I mentioned that earlier. And also we have a very heavy support for our trades. That's part of the green jobs, the good jobs. So the National Electrical Contractors Association has a presence at LaCretz as well. They're always looking for opportunities for their members. Okay, so I'll just run through a few of the exhibits we have, just to give you a flavor. And so we have a smart home demonstration, and we use that to demonstrate the latest in-home technologies, a very heavy residential focus here for both electrification and high efficiency. We also have kind of a virtual, a staged virtual demonstration of how the connected home of the future will operate, and you have to be there. You have to attend in person to experience it, but it's pretty cool. Then we have the customer engagement lab and demonstration space, and here is where this is the kind of the standard stuff you would see in a utility tech center that's customer facing, and it explains how our power system works, how the water system works, how these various energy measures work, water conservation. In the lower right there, you see a toilet. That's a demonstration of low flow toilets and how much water they save. And then the history of lighting as well, which is a very nice presentation. Here's the gray water system, and this is really exciting because this is the first permitted gray water system in the city of Los Angeles. And in fact, the building department, building and safety, which is code enforcement, they used this installation to generate training materials for their inspectors for future installations around the city. And this is one of those pieces. This is one of these demonstration that was supplied to us by the manufacturer for free, so that they could get a product installed in the city. And a very nice investment they made. The lighting lab, we have a full featured lighting lab with what are called photospheres. We have a 1 meter and a 2 meter photosphere. These are for assessing lighting. And as we move everything to LEDs, LED has some specific characteristics around lighting quality across the spectrum. And there's some trade-offs between that quality and the energy consumption of the LEDs. this equipment allows us to assess that on a product-specific basis. And so, in addition to the photospheres, we have other equipment. And the main thing is, we're looking to, as the lighting technology advances quickly into new applications, we want to make sure that it's performing the way the manufacturer says it will. So this lab will acquire a new product that, say, Bureau of Streetlights is thinking about installing. And obviously, they don't want to move forward with 100,000 streetlights only to have them, burn out 3 years later because of something they didn't anticipate. And so we're able to do that type of assessment as well in that lighting lab. And it's my folks, my engineers that operate that. Then the microgrid I mentioned, like I said, it's 175 kilowatt solar array over the parking area. At the moment, it only supplies about 15 to 20% of the building's electricity needs, but we do have a 111 kilowatt hour battery installed as well. So we have enough energy stored on site at any given time to operate not the entire building, but essential applications within the building were the power to go out. And I mentioned plumbing. We have a plumbing demonstration test lab as well to show how we work very closely with IAPMO. I can't remember exactly what that stands for, but it's a code organization around plumbing. And we work closely with them. They do the actual certifications of low flow toilets, shower heads, faucets, and they're looking not just for the water savings, but also for the durability. And so they do. They have the robotic handles that turn the faucets on and off and on and off and on and off for, say, 100,000 cycles to make sure mechanically they aren't breaking down. And so we can demonstrate all that. We can actually test and demonstrate those features. And it's really cool because a lot of times the public doesn't see what's going on behind the scenes in terms of how these products get to market. And between the lighting lab and the plumbing lab, we can demonstrate the nuts and bolts of those processes. And with that, I will turn it back to Dr. Lee. I appreciate the opportunity to present on our La Cretz campus. We're very proud of it for obvious reasons. And I thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you, David, for an outstanding presentation. I enjoyed it very much. We do have a question from the audience. And the first question is, what kind of a startup would you like to see in La Cretz?
I'm sorry, what kind of a
startup company in your incubator?
Oh, okay. Well, we're clean tech, and so pretty much anything within that is the kind of companies we're looking for to participate in the incubator. So it's not just energy efficiency, it's not just energy. You saw the water, transportation, even agriculture. And in fact, that's probably one of the areas we're a little light on in the incubator right now is agriculture, especially things like hydroponics, indoor agriculture, specifically cannabis. I don't think we're going to have cannabis on site at La Cretz per se, but we're certainly assessing things like the grow lamps and the life cycle and the life cycle of the plants and the flowering and learning all about that. So that's probably, that's one area we'd be very interested in, but also drought tolerant landscaping is another area of keen interest for us.
Thank you. So it's a time to move on to the next speaker. Thank David again for the inspiring, outstanding talk.
Thank you.
I will see you at the panel discussion. Thank you. So
Thank you.
it is my great pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Edwin Holmquist. Edwin is the Emerging Technologies Program Manager at SoCal Edison, based in Rosemead, California. Previously, Edwin was the president at the Southern California ASHRAE chapter. His program funds support new technology advancements into customer programs that support California's goal. Edwin, please take it away.
Thank you, GP, and welcome. It's a privilege and honor to be here today presenting and celebrating, quite frankly, the Mother Earth, and our wonderful globe that we live in, and that gives us life. So I want to make sure everybody can see my presentation. Is it visible?
Yes, it is visible. You can use the slideshow. Yes.
Okay, very well. Thank you, GP, for that. So what I want to do, just splash some pictures of Mother Earth, first of all, as we kick off this presentation, and say this is for Pachamama, and that's translated into from the Aymara and Quechua languages from the people of South America to mean World Mother or Mother Earth, and it's widely used in those regions of the world. Very much a connection to the Earth, and so I just wanted to throw that in there. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today is really about building electrification or building decarbonization, and the pathway that Edison has sort of set for our goals in relation to what's happening in California. So California, as you know, has set a goal to decarbonize its economy. In turn, Edison has charted a pathway to how to achieve those goals. It started with a 2030 pathways white paper that was published in 2017 and continued with a pathways document that was revised or reissued that sets the pathways for 2045. I'm going to be talking a little bit more in depth in one of these areas, but just wanted to start with a high level overview of what that pathways document and white paper outlines. I'll go into a little bit more detail, but basically the pathways white paper establishes a path to decarbonize electricity 100% retail sales, 70% electrification of buildings for residential and small commercial, 75% electrification of transportation, of all forms of transportation, and 43% electrification of and use of low carbon fuels. And the remaining, because it's not all achievable through all these means, is the sinking of the remaining carbon in some way that we can store it and lock it up and put it away. So just a quote here about from Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General. Climate change is a defining issue of our time, and I think we can't deny that. We're at a defining moment, he says, and I think that's quite right on target, and it's really our challenge, and we want to step up to it. And I think California has done that. I think Southern California Edison is doing that, and in our 2045 paper, California, in 2045, California is committed to carbon neutrality across all sectors, right, of its economy, and 100% decarbonization of retail electric supply. So what does this look like really in terms of the challenge, right? Sizing up the challenge. So on the left here, or on the chart, you have what the various components are that make up the emissions in California. Today we're emitting, or in 2017, we're emitting 243 million metric tons of CO2 through these various segments of the economy. In order for us to meet the objectives that California has set out to do, we need to reduce that to 108 million metric tons. Tremendous challenge, as you can imagine. All sectors need to participate in that and decarbonize in order to achieve these goals. So one other sort of data point here. So in the 2020 Spring Day, if you were to just look at what the electric supply looks like in California, you see this sort of mix, right? So spring and summer, very different already, but you know, heavily, like summer heavily reliant on natural gas, not so much in the spring. But nevertheless, quite a bit of generation, solar generation, imports, etc. Some amount of solar curtailment going on in the middle of the day in the spring, not so much in the summer. We were able to utilize all of that in a summer day. And a little bit of solar of energy storage going on in the middle of the day in the spring. So just to give you a just high level. So what could that look like in, you know, in 2045? If we see an increase in electricity from the grid and 40% increase in peak load. So the picture is dramatically different, right? So we have a substantial amount of solar in the grid, potentially a lot of it being stored in the spring, a lot of it, some of it being exported, some of it being curtailed, quite frankly, right? And a lot of storage that is being harvested in the middle of the day is being shifted for utilization in the evening hours, right? In these shoulder hours here on the left and right on the purple. In the summer, things look a little bit different. I think we have almost full utilization of the solar production, but it heavily still depended on expanding our storage capability quite a bit so that we can fill these shoulder sections of the day. All right, so again, just to reiterate, right? So we had in 2017 we had a pathways document that proposed the least cost pathway to meet the California 2030 greenhouse reduction goals. That entailed providing 80% carbon-free electricity by 2030, effectively a 30% renewable portfolio standard in place. The electrification of 7 million light-duty vehicles and 1/3 of the space and water heating. Now, as I mentioned, we updated that in 2018 to advance the California policies in line with Governor Brown's executive order that requires carbon economy to become carbon neutral by 2045. And also Senate Bill 100 would require 100% of electricity retail sales to be from carbon-free resources by 2045. And also codify the RPS or the renewable portfolio standard requirements of 60% by 2030. Again, that's upon us, right? We're talking less than 9 years now to achieve that. So quite on our way to doing that, but still a big challenge, as I mentioned, in terms of the shifting needs of the grid and what to do with that energy, which will largely come from solar. So the updated white paper that I mentioned is a vision for reaching these climate goals that are outlined in these various mandates and legislation. So we are also aligning the economy-wide carbon neutrality by 2045. But we acknowledge that it will require to transform how the state sources its energy, especially in the transportation and building sectors. It describes how an electric-led pathway is feasible and relatively cost-effective in achieving these goals. It increases the sense of urgency to achieving the interim goal of 2030, which keeps California on the path to success in 2045, achieving our targets there. So this is a little bit of what I mentioned earlier. I won't go too much into detail, but the challenge is huge, right? And this is sort of the various sectors. All sectors need to be pulling their own weight, if you will, in order for us to achieve the substantial 75% reduction in carbon emissions. So what does this look like in more precisely in building electrification? So if you zoom in onto what is 70%, it's a pretty modest and pretty aggressive at the same time goal to reduce from 54 million metric tons that are being emitted now to 8 million metric tons. So if you imagine what we do today, all the activities that we do as consumers, all the programs that we offer as utilities to the market, the intent is to reduce combustion, reduce carbon, and this obviously is in concert with what's happening in the grid and the greening of the grid, if you will, or the decarbonization of the generation or the supply. So building electrification today, reduces total GHG emission in a single home by 30 to 60% relative to a natural gas home. As electricity gets cleaner, right, these reductions are estimated to increase to almost 90% by 2050. In addition to the health benefits, which we know are real, all electric homes can provide an overall cost savings to most customers, and I'll go a little bit into details of what that could look like to every user. Building electrification can contribute to a better utilization as well of the high load factor of the grid, or contribute to higher load factor of the grid, so better utilization. The building cost for electric homes can be less than for mixed fuel homes, is what we have, our current practice in place today. Plus, electrified homes can also provide overall energy savings for an average customer, as I mentioned. So let me briefly tell you a little bit about a study that was done by E3, an engineering firm or research firm. It looked at what a retrofit package could look like for a single home and a low-rise multifamily home, and what it could look like for a new construction all-electric scenario. So when you look at a retrofit package, essentially just focusing on space conditioning or space heating and heat pump water heaters as the technology of choice, we see 100% net bill savings, essentially, in a retrofit setting. When you look at all electric new construction, we see a 66% and a 55% bill savings, and then we see a bill increase that is not in the same range, but we essentially see the 35%, let's say, on single family homes, and a bill increase of only less than $100 in 35% of the homes, and in most homes we will see a net bill savings. So only a modest, as I mentioned earlier, a modest increase in cost would be observed by almost 90%, or no cost increase or net savings, or a modest increase that is less than $100 per year to be able to decarbonize those or achieve electrification and move into the path that we are interested in. So this supports the idea that electrification, along with the greening of the grid, if you will, or greening of the supply, would achieve the goals that Edison has set out in its 2045 Pathways document. So what is Edison doing to achieve these goals, right? So today we have several programs. I won't go into the details. We have several activities going on, various pilots going on. We have a robust codes and standards effort, an emerging technologies program that I oversee, that is going to, soon to become a statewide program that focuses on the sort of the mainstreaming of technologies from early availability in the market to potentially funneling those or bringing those to customers and providing incentives for them. We're also supporting two new programs that are ordered by SB 1477 which they're dubbed build and tech pilots, and they're actually in the process of being launched. What are we looking at for tomorrow and the future is that, there's going to be a proposed building electrification pilots. There'll be an expansion of the cell generation incentive program that will look at other aspects to stimulate the storage portion of what we think is needed. There'll be other activities along, continue to leverage EE programs to support decarbonization. And in the long term, and again, the long term is really, it's a very complex sort of set of proceedings. So we want to leverage all these things to all these sort of proceedings, whether it's efficiency, whether it's self-generation incentive programs, whether it's storage programs, whether it's low income, whether it's new build and tech pilots or programs that emerge, or building electrification programs that are in the works, to basically fulfill and support these goals that we have. We also want to learn, obviously, from the pilots and apply those learnings as we move forward. And where possible and where feasible, where we want to be able to advance the building codes and to be able to continue to push for all electric type construction for new construction or commercial. Probably there'll be some rate design implications associated with that. As you know, rates or the tariffs that we pay in our bills are sort of, they go through a very rigorous process, collaborative process, a public process to be implemented. And that also, because of that process, they sometimes lag behind in terms of what's really needed immediately. So rate design will be part of the equation. There's also, potentially other incentive mechanism or financing, because some of these sort of transformations in the building sector will require investment from homeowners, primarily in the sort of retrofit sort of setting. So we want to make sure that we provide the right support to make those transformations possible. As you can imagine, this is sort of low in the priority list of most consumers. It's more of a policy driver. It's more of and it's very hard to motivate everybody to move in that direction. But we think there is an economic pathway. We demonstrated through an analysis in our 2045 Pathways white paper, and we encourage you all to take the plunge and critically look at what you're when you're due for a furnace or a water heater replacement, to push and ask your contractors to look in that direction. This is something that is a difficult transformation that also needs to happen in our trades. So it's with your collaboration and all of our collaboration. I've done it myself, and it was challenging, but it wasn't very difficult at the end, and it's very rewarding for me to be able to say that I'm fully electrified in my home and in a retrofit in a very 1930s home. So it's possible if you do it at the right time when you're involving other changes. So with that, I'll leave you with this, right? With this thought. Imagine a world where the energy that powers our lives and propels us forward is provided by the Earth's clean sources. So the sort of symbiosis that we want to think about. So I'll turn it back to GP, and if there's any time to take any questions right now. If not, we'll transition to the next agenda item, which I think it's a break.
Evan, thank you so much for an excellent presentation. I do have a question here. Are there any concern that SCE has about grid resilience so that California doesn't suffer a reverse of what happened to Texas? a couple months ago during heat wave?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, this is definitely a big concern. Us, it's not only to mention, I mean, we have different challenges, right? We may not face the same challenges that Texas had with a cold snap. Geographically, they're in a different situation. We certainly have had our fair share of challenges with respect to wildfires and and mudslides and these sort of things. So clearly, that is a concern. The hardening of the grid is a key initiative for Edison. And that's the physical assets, right, that are outside in the how to make those more resilient in areas that are prone to burning, so that interruption of service is not there, or even more importantly, right, that they are not causing any issues. So you're all familiar by now, those that live in the service areas around in Southern California, or even all over California, that that we have this term called PSPS, which is public safety, public shut off, which is essentially a mechanism for us to reduce in times of wind events, curtail power, so that a line that is perhaps brought down by wind or by branches falling on them do not spark fires, right? So there's been some strategies to be implemented that way. Some cases, right, a lot of people are interrupted or disrupted, in that process. But the important thing, what's going, that's kind of the immediate sort of response, because the grid was built in a way that it's segmented, right, and it's not able to isolate itself in various smaller pieces. So in some areas of the grid, and depending on where you are in the state, you sometimes have to curtail large number of customers. So just to give you an example of what's being thought about, is how to isolate parts of the grid so that the affected customers are a much smaller group of customers, without having to curtail, hundreds of thousands or millions in some cases, which is, we've heard in Northern California happening. So that has to do with fundamental, initial, or the initial design of the grid. The hardening of the grid consists of trying to be more have better, more switchable sort of gear that allows you to set, kind of break up the interruptions into smaller chunks without interrupting folks. So that's one very clear path, if you will, on that is not connected to 2045, but it is in an indirect way, because a heavier reliance on electricity to power our lives, if you will, right? From heating your home, from water heating, all the way to driving and mobility, right? That heavy reliance is, mandates or requires a more resilient, reliable grid, which is, already is very reliable, but is during these very episodic situations that seem to be occurring more and more in our lives, with fires and wind events that are manifest itself by climate change, quite frankly, that are driving them. We do need to pay attention to that, and we are paying attention to that. And it'll become it is a keen part of the strategy and focus of the company to recognize that as we expand those capabilities and expand reliance, and we push for 2045 California goals and Edison goals along the way, that we do provide a more resilient grid that serve the needs of our customers.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you for the inspiring talk. So it's a time for a short break for 5 minutes, and we will resume the go-to-meeting presentation at 10 past 10. So you have a short 5 minutes of break. So we are looking forward to the following distinguished speakers. So please come back on time. I'll see you then. at the 10:10. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoy your 5 minutes short break to answer nature needs. And before we start the next speaker, I'd like to remind everyone, if you have a question, send your question through the chat channel. Write it down, and our staff will capture your question and send it to me to ask questions. So it is my great pleasure to introduce next speaker, Anne Hancock. Anne co-founded the Climate Center in 2001 and was its executive director until 2019, when she recruited a new CEO and became chief strategist. The organization now leads Climate Safe California, a campaign to accelerate the state's climate goal to meet the most current science, achieve net negative emissions statewide by 2030, and be a worldwide model. The Climate Center has been a key leader in the exponential growth of community choice energy, which serve more than 11 million Californians with 88% greenhouse gas electricities. GHG electricity. So let's welcome Anne for her presentation. Anne, please take it away.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Sonia, are you there? Great, okay. Given the enormity of the climate crisis, what can we do? Are solutions there that are commensurate with the scale of the problem? Since you are here because you want to answer these questions, you're asking, what can we do? It's so dire. 20 years ago, in Sonoma County, where I'm based, we said we have to do something. And so we set a goal to be the first community in the nation to have all of our cities and the county pledge to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. Our mission has always been speed and scale greenhouse gas emission reductions to be in alignment with the most current science. And we've asked ourselves, what can we do? And that's what this presentation is all about. Next slide, please. As GP said, we are known for spreading community choice energy throughout California, and this is a speed and scale greenhouse gas emission reduction strategy that has been very effective and is still spreading across California, but it's not enough. Next slide, please. So the current science dictates that we have to move much faster. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is the world's foremost authority, but it's behind the times. It relies on consensus to operate, which makes it conservative, and it also relies on past studies in order to predict the future. But the current science is moving ahead much more rapidly. Next slide, please. Here's some of the most current science that talks about surpassing the 1.55C threshold by 2030, 10 years earlier than the IPCC projected. Next slide. And what we see now is that we are experiencing an extreme drought. The governor was in our county yesterday declaring a state of emergency because of this. And it could be that this is what our future looks like if we don't deal with global climate change. Next slide. The public health impacts are enormous. Here's some examples: that fossil fuel air pollution kills 1 in 5 globally. The smoke storm throughout California in 2020 was estimated to cause an additional 1,200 to 3,000 deaths among those 65 and older. And 7.3 million Californians live within 1 mile of oil and gas wells. And the studies have shown that this can lead to tremendous public health impacts, such as low birth weight and asthma. Next slide. The cost of delay is enormous. Next slide, or next. So we should be investing today rather than trying to repair the damage in the future. Next slide. So in the 2018 wildfires, it's estimated that there was $150 billion in damage, and the 2020 wildfires were much, much more severe than this. Next, please. If we invested that money, say $80 billion, into job creation and the green economy, we would generate about 750,000 jobs. Next slide. So back to the science. Here's one that talks about 9 of 15 global tipping points are now underway. And this will lead to an uninhabitable hothouse climate if we don't act soon. Next slide. So this is what I hope one of your takeaways is that the climate reality is outpacing the policy, and we must step up now. Next slide. So why focus on policy? We have been asking ourselves, oops, if you could back up, please. Back up, thank you, there we go. We've been asking ourselves, what can we do to deliver speed and scale greenhouse gas emission reductions? And we studied research and development, we studied education, we studied individual action, and certainly all of those things are needed. But the thing that delivered the speed and scale greenhouse gas emission reduction was having a focus on policy change. And why is that? Because policy change can change the rules of the game for everybody, especially business. And business is the engine of change. So if the new rules reward positive climate-friendly behavior, then the economy shifts in that direction. We've had some terrific examples of that in previous presentations today. So we want to make it easier for everybody to make climate-friendly choices. There's 2 examples that we've talked about. Solar is one of them. It creates a virtuous cycle right now. The more solar we have, the lower the price. The lower the price, the more solar we have. And now solar is outcompeting fossil fuels. And the other example is community choice. State enabling legislation, a policy change, allowed local governments to move ahead much farther, faster than they could have otherwise. And it's led to a whole industry that supports community choice, such as banking and power supply, even phone banking. So these 2 examples, solar and community choice, are what we want to see accelerating and more. Next slide, please. So how do we get those policy choices? We need advocacy from business, from governments, and from people, everyday activists and citizens, from churches, and so on and so forth. We like to say that governments are like sailboats. They go nowhere without wind, and we put the wind in their sails. So go forward 4 slides, please. More and more wind in their sails to get the policies that we need. All right, next slide. So bold targets and bold policies work. As goes California, goes the world. And that's why our focus right now is on California and policy change in our state. Here's one example. Assembly Bill 1493 passed in 2002, known as the Tailpipe Emissions Bill, was later adopted by 13 states and became the basis for our national clean car standards. Next slide. California must lead the country and the world for a climate-safe future. Next slide. And here's where we are. We saw some of this earlier in a different version. The red bar is our 1990 baseline in California. The gold bar is where we were with our emissions in 2018. The apricot colored bar is our current target. And the bars in the circle of green show where we need to be to meet the most current science. The dark blue bar is what our emissions need to be in 2030. And then the green bar shows the amount of carbon we need to sequester through nature-based solutions so that we achieve the light blue bar on the far right, which is emissions less net negative emissions. That's how we like to refer to this by 2030. Next slide, please. Governor Newsom has given voice to the need to step up. He said, we are in a climate emergency. Our goals are inadequate. We must fast track our goals. And by that, I also assume he meant our policies. And he issued 2 executive orders following the huge fires last year. However, next slide. California is now behind. We used to be a global climate leader, but we have fallen behind. Let's take a look at some of the targets. Go ahead and click those up, please. The European Union, the United Kingdom, Finland, Rhode Island, and now the Biden administration. Much, much more aggressive targets than California has. Next slide. So we need more aggressive targets and policies now. And that's what Climate Safe California, our multi-year campaign, is all about. Our vision is that we will enact the bold policies required by science to dramatically cut emissions, start drawdown, and secure resilient communities by 2030 and inspire global action. Next slide, please. So this accelerates the timelines by 15 years. You heard referenced by previous speakers that California has this 2045 target for carbon neutrality. We're saying we have to move that up to adhere to the most current science and achieve net negative emissions. Let's go to the next slide, please. The pillars of Climate Safe California are 4. So under the umbrella of these much more aggressive targets, we need to phase out the fossil fuel emissions. 2 is we need to scale up nature-based sequestration and achieve 100 million metric tons by 2030. We need to invest in our communities to make them more resilient, to give us the microgrids that were described in earlier presentations and make for a more climate safe future. Right now with the power shutoffs and with the evacuations, I can tell you in Sonoma County, it has been horrible. I've been evacuated twice. The power was turned out many, many times, and we were under a cloud of smoke many, many, many days. And it is so very serious. And for the people who are on oxygen and require electricity for their survival, it really is a very frightening future unless we create more energy resilient communities. And we need to generate the money and invest the money at the state level and then leverage private capital so that we can actually pay for and invest in this climate safe future. Next slide, please. So the principles underlying our campaign are 3. We have to be based in the latest science. We have to ensure a just transition so that the workers, their families, and the communities that rely on fossil fuel are protected and have, we can't just leave them in the lurch. And then lastly, we need to prioritize climate justice. Right now, even yesterday, I think it was the American Lung Association said the worst air quality in the nation is in Bakersfield. That leads to horrible health impacts and horrible quality of life impacts. We need to prioritize those communities so that they can live high quality lives and be brought up so that there's equity. Next slide, please. Right now, before the state legislature is a very important bill, Senate Bill 582, introduced by Henry Stern. And this, even though it isn't the 2030 target, it's a 2035 target, and it's the state's first ever statutory net negative emissions goal. So this is a very, very exciting development for us, and we are recruiting lots of partners. You see all the logos from the partners we've recruited to support this bill. Next slide, please. We're also very excited about a paper that we helped get written and delivered, and it provides the science and the expert voice behind what we've been calling for in Climate Safe California. This is available currently on the web, and we're hoping that it soon is published in a scientific publication. But you'll, next slide, please. Just 2 days ago, the LA Times featured this study and talked about the need for accelerated timelines. Right now on the LA Times website, their homepage, this article is being featured, and we're very excited because this is what we need to get the word out about accelerating our targets and getting the policies in place. Next slide, please. The thing is, the solutions exist. We have what we need in order to make this happen now, but what we lack is political will. And that's why it's so important. I hope I'm reaching you, the audience, to join us in pushing for these accelerated timelines and policies. Next slide, please. So this is our call to action. It can start with a simple step, which is endorsing Climate Safe California. You can go on our web, it's a simple little form, and you make this public pledge of support. And this helps inspire other people and other states and other nations. We currently have over 1,000 endorsements from businesses, governments, elected leaders, and everyday people to say, yes, we need to accelerate these targets. And I hope that you will do this, maybe even right now. Next slide, please. Here's an example of one of our California leaders. Here's the former head of the Cal EPA, and he was Governor Schwarzenegger's climate expert, Terry Tamminen. I strongly endorse the goal of Climate Safe California to achieve net negative emissions by 2030. 2050 is too late. The campaign's focus on science, urgency, and policy is exactly what's needed, and California must lead the way. Next slide, please. Additional calls to action is when you endorse Climate Safe California, you'll be connected with us, and we will send you calls to action so that you can go online and make your voice known to our state legislators and policymakers. And also, if you can contribute to our efforts, money fuels our organization in this campaign, and we really appreciate every bit of support that we can get. Next slide, please. So imagine the headlines in December 2030 that California is the first state to reach net negative emissions, and it kickstarts the nation and the world. So this is our vision, and many think, oh my God, you're asking for the impossible. But the fact is we must do this, and we can do this. Next slide. So thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
Thank you so much for outstanding talk. So I do have, why there is echo? So I do have a question from the audience. The question is, every year, there are more and more wildfires. As we heard from the previous speakers, the concern about wildfire on the grid resilience. Will we be able to meet the goal you just outlined? And because it takes only a day to burn down a decade of a forest. So is there any policy to address this?
Actually, there is policy being created. First of all, we need, and more money is being put into fighting wildfires, and more money is being put into managing our forests so that they are not subject to the conflagrations that we've been seeing. And also more money is being put into hardening our homes so that they aren't so subject to being burned down, which is not a greenhouse gas perspective per se, but it certainly is a human element that we have to deal with. So the asker of this question asks a really, really key question right now for California, because we have the wildfires, the short-term climate pollutants, the black carbon, as well as the greenhouse gas emissions are serious climate pollutants and really impact our ability to achieve climate safe California. So can we do it? Once again, I will say we can do it and we have to do it. So that's, and we do need more policy and more money in order to implement that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It's a time to move on to the next speaker. So our next speaker, somehow there's an echo. Chris, can you fix that problem?
GP, it might just be delay on your internet connection.
Oh, okay. So let's welcome the next speaker, Yanni Solheim. Yanni is the Director of Social Impact at Niantic, the AR tech company behind games like Ingram and Pokemon Go. I'm a player of that. In her 10 years at Niantic, she has spent time across partnership, marketing, and social impact with a focus on using game for good. She is the author of Eva the Engineer, a children's book, and the proud mom of 2 young girls. Yanni, please take away.
Thanks so much, GP. Let's see, I'm just going to get my screen up. Can you all see it?
Not yet.
Can you see it now?
Not yet.
It says I'm presenting. Maybe someone can help me here.
Chris?
Chris, I have it up if you want to make me presenter.
Super. Thank you. Let me know when you're ready.
I am ready. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, this is great. Okay, so hi, I'm Yanni Solheim. I'm the Director of Social Impact at Niantic. And we are a little bit of a different perspective on all of this really amazing conversation that we're having today. So I hope it's useful to all of you. But I'll take a minute first to just kind of explain our perspective and what we do, if we'll go to the next slide. So our mission is to inspire people to explore the world together. And in particular, we are a games and technology company, but we're specifically focused on encouraging people to engage with one another. So instead of, you know, the classic gamer picture of someone sitting in their basement in the dark, alone, playing a game for hours on end. We're really keen to use technology to get people outside in the ways that are comfortable to them, engaging with one another, because we believe when that happens, really good things can happen. And that's what really drives us to create the technology that we have. Next slide. So our whole goal is getting people outside, and we have 3 tenets that help drive that. One is exploration of the world. So we use real world locations to help guide gameplay and encourage people to visit specific places that have some sort of cultural or historical significance in a community. We encourage physical exercise. You physically have to walk in order to engage with our games. Maybe most people are familiar with our most popular game, which is Pokemon Go, that came out in 2016. And one of the most fun reactions we got from players was, how do I walk in this game? Was kind of like the biggest question. And it was like, well, you put your shoes on and you go outside and engage with the world. And then the third is real world social interaction. So in general, your gameplay is stronger if you're working with other people. The reason that we're focused on all 3 things is that when they come together, we feel that really amazing things can happen. Next slide. So good things do happen, and we've been measuring that for the last 10 years that we've been around. We've been trying to figure out how we can use technology to encourage and engage people in really positive ways. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the things that have happened. Players visit hundreds of national parks all around the world. It's a global set of games. And in order to play those games, they've walked more than 38 billion kilometers since 2016. They've made 600 million friendship connections. Those are through the games, but have to be facilitated in real life. So the people that you're connected with in the games are also people that you have connected with in real life. And 47% of players, so almost half of our hundreds of millions of players, feel motivated to connect with others, which is a really important piece. I think when people connect with each other, really good things can happen. Next slide. So here's just some imagery of some of our quote unquote real world interactions. They span from everything from a local arts and wine festival that we might help invite players to a global event that we have every year, except for during COVID times, in which 50 to 100,000 players come together in one place to play our games, engage with one another, and think through various problems and solutions that communities are having. My team in particular is responsible for amplifying all of this activity and engagement by working with nonprofits, foundations, and city governments to encourage players who are citizens and local community members to connect with these organizations and really identify ways in which they, as a local citizen, can become a part of the solution. We are very focused on sustainability efforts. We feel that because we have hundreds of millions of players around the world, and because our players play the games in the real world outside, that we have a real connection and a responsibility to think about how we can use our technology and the many, many players who play our games to find better and more effective solutions for sustainability efforts. Next slide. So let's dive a little bit deeper into our sustainability work. Next. So here's our work stream. We are a pretty small team at Niantic. The company itself is a little over 700 people, and we are a 2-person social impact team. We like it that way. We find that we can do a lot with very little. And so the way in which we structure our sustainability work is through a multitude of areas. The first is our sustainability campaign, which I'll talk about in a minute. Next is partnerships, then internal work, And then we're constantly reassessing our projects and our initiatives to make sure that we're staying up to date with science and the most recent data. Next slide. So, sustainability campaign. This is actually happening for us this week. Obviously an overlap with Earth Day. So if we go to the next slide, I'll explain a little bit about what it is. It's an annual campaign that we host for players with local nonprofits. So the idea here is to really harness the fact that we have players all around the world in so many countries and help connect them to the local sustainability efforts that are happening in their communities. So this year's a little bit different, but I'll explain how we do it in normal times, and then I'll explain the COVID version. Normally, we work with local nonprofits to host cleanup events for players and local community members. And when they host these events, players are invited to come out and interact with them. So that might mean cleaning up trash, it might mean sorting recycling, it might mean planting local native plants. There's kind of a multitude of activities that players can do. What we don't do is we do not encourage players to play the games when they are at these events and when they're working on the sustainability efforts. We really want them to have a heads-up experience, to make real deep connections with nonprofits and city governments so that they can develop a deeper long-term relationship with those organizations. Niantic sponsors these and then also measures the overall impact of the cleanup events. And then based on that, players get to unlock in-game rewards, which if any of you are even light gamers, you know in-game rewards are a big deal. Because of COVID, we've had to iterate a little bit this year and last year. And this year, instead of doing the live in-person events, we're asking players to take individual actions that help support sustainability efforts. So those are very basic things, right? Things that maybe a sustainability advocate like myself might think are normal, but really are not widespread. And so we ask folks to clean up their neighborhood. We ask them to consider composting, you know, install LED light bulbs, that sort of thing. Very lightweight actions that we hope make an impact if hundreds of millions of players actually take this action. So we're measuring all of that on social this week. It's been really fun and exciting to see our players share the ways in which they're helping to care for the planet. And we believe that by sharing this publicly, it's helping to advance sustainability ideas and encourage others to participate. Let's go to the next slide. So the activations, I mentioned that there are in-game rewards. From a basic level, it is, you know, more Pokemon will appear if 10,000 players come together and help clean up their parks. We also create in-game avatar items. So the image in the middle, you can see this avatar is wearing a sustainability shirt, and it's a way for players to indicate their support of sustainability efforts. We've also done this for the Global Goals Summit before and a couple of other initiatives, and it's really fun to see players stand up and speak up for the things that they believe in. And then the image on the right is something that we're experimenting with this week with the National Park Foundation. They have their National Parks Week, and so we're doing a little bit of cross-marketing promotion that I think is going to be pretty valuable in terms of just getting various ideas and concepts out cross-promotionally to different kinds of audiences. Next slide. So measurement, this is a key one that we continue to iterate on because we find that there are many different metrics and different nonprofits measure things differently based on the country. But we do focus very much so on the types of trash that players might pick up, the types of plants that they are planting, educational materials, obviously the numbers of players. You can see a quick snapshot here on the right-hand side of all of the metrics from our 2019 sustainability campaign cleanup event. It was our most successful for sure, and it was a really amazing way to see how when you include people from all different kinds of communities, how much of a difference it can make. Next slide. So next, partnerships and collaborations. This is a huge part of our efforts. We are a for-profit company. We also believe that we have a strong responsibility for things like sustainability and are constantly looking for new ways in which we can lend our resources and our efforts and our reach across our player base to help sustainability efforts. Next slide. So here's a small example of the types of partnerships we have. They really range in what we do. I mentioned the National Park Foundation. I'll give a deeper example of them in the next slide, but we also partner with organizations like Leave No Trace, who directly advise us on how our players might be making an impact on the world as they walk around. They're really key to our efforts around real world events. So they have quite a bit of really great advice on how we can make sure that we leave parks better than when we left it when we have an event for, say, 50,000 people. And then we also have a couple of alliances that we're a part of. So the one I mentioned here is Playing for the Planet, which is run by UNEP and is a group of gaming and tech companies who have specifically signed up for a range of commitments based on the company level, with the idea that because these gaming companies have billions of players literally around the world, we have a responsibility and an opportunity to connect with those players and help engage them in sustainability efforts. Niantic is very unique in that our games are played outside. Most of these games are played inside and on consoles or computers. Ours are on mobile phones. But it's a really amazing alliance in which all of us gather pretty regularly from around the world and work alongside the UN, who helps kind of guide us in terms of our annual and then long-term commitments to sustainability efforts. Next slide. So here's a quick example of something we've done with the National Park Foundation. I don't want to get too much in the weeds here on the gamification front, but when players play our game, Pokemon Go, they walk around the world and they interact with real world locations in their games. And when they do so, they might get what we call a sponsored gift. And a sponsored gift is just a virtual package of different items that players can use. It's been an experiment for us because what we're doing this week is using these sponsored gifts to help increase fundraising for the National Park Foundation. So if a player were to click through all the way to the right, they'd be taken to a fundraising page in which Niantic is matching. I don't have full data on how it's going so far, but we've gotten really good feedback from the players, and we think it's just one way to spread the word and encourage players to get engaged with sustainability efforts. Next slide. So internally speaking, this is a really big one. If we go to the next slide, I mentioned that our company is a little bit over 700 people, so relatively small in comparison to quite a few tech and gaming companies. And we have about 9 offices, but we are headquartered in San Francisco with several hundred people there. And internally speaking, when we think about what our impact is kind of across our company and across our employee base, there are many factors to consider. And we partner with quite a few organizations who help advise us on that, not only as a one-time thing, but as an ongoing conversation that we have with our office administrators, with our employees, with the various foundations that we're partnered with. And we find that if we consistently reassess our physical impact on the environment, we make smarter decisions. So for example, last year when the pandemic hit and everyone had to go home, we had to rethink what our commitments were around sustainability. All of a sudden, employees were not consuming lunch every day at our cafeteria. They were not using the compostable plates that we had there. And so we had to reassess, how does that impact our company's overall impact? So that is certainly made up of a cross-functional group of employees of the company, and it's something that we continually look to learn on as we grow and as the world evolves. Next slide. So forward thinking. If we go to the next slide, this is very similar to our internal thought process in that we really believe that our commitments to various social impact initiatives are ongoing and long-term. We aren't, really of the mindset that if we put our logo on something, we can call it a day and call it corporate social responsibility. Instead, we really are very committed to thinking about how we can holistically use our products, our people, our players to make real impact. And that means that we have to consistently and on an ongoing basis evaluate that impact. So we see that in kind of three buckets. The first is engaging players. Again, I really believe that this is where there is huge power and opportunity, is engaging with community members and citizens in ways that are relatable and in ways that make sense to them, and use that to help push forward things like public policy and various local initiatives. The second is to evaluate the impact of our work. So consistently understanding what our carbon impact might be, understanding how our events might have impact on local parks and local economies, and whether or not 50% of the players have traveled to a place. And then the third is game tweaks that encourage more sustainable practices. So we have 12 games in production right now. So even though Pokemon Go is certainly the most well-known, we have quite a few other games that we are working on. And we're looking at those games in a little bit of a new way. So we're asking ourselves, how can we use these games to gently encourage thought around recycling, compost, use of solar energy in ways that are relatable and a part of the gameplay as a whole. We also have a AR or augmented reality platform that will enable third-party developers to create their own experiences off of the structure that we've already built. So similar to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, this will be a place for developers to come and develop things like sustainability apps and nature walks and that sort of thing. And then I think if we go to the next slide, yeah, all done. So I hope that was a positive difference in presentation from all the other really amazing discussions, and I welcome questions now and in the later workshop.
Yanni, thank you so much for an excellent presentation, because we already exceed the quota for the time limits. So I will defer all the questions to the panel discussion session. Thank you again for your excellent presentation. Let's move on to the next speaker, Luke Savary. Luke focus on the energy access gap in the health sector and humanitarian sector. He holds a master in commercial engineering from KU Leuven and master of science development management from the London School of Economics. Luke worked in Mozambique, Senegal, and Libya for several international NGOs and social entrepreneurs. Social enterprise, including Solar Now and Save the Children International. Look, please take away.
Thank you so much, GP. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me today. That's a tough act to follow, especially the Pokemon Go one. So I'm going to try here to share my screen. If you can't see it, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to move ahead under the assumption that you
Yes,
can.
we can see it.
Perfect, perfect. Good. So
You
today
can
I
use
want
a
to.
presentation mode so it can be bigger.
All right, great. Let me try to get there then. Just bear with me. All right, well, I think you can see this. Is this big enough for you to see it?
Now I can see we can see the
All right, it says it's paused. Can you see the presentation now?
yes.
Perfect. All right, I'm just gonna do it like
Yes.
that.
Just click the slideshow button.
All right, let me do that. Did that work?
There you go.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the support. Excellent. All right, with that little delay, let's dive in. So today I'll talk briefly about powering healthcare. But before I can do that, we need to take a few steps back, just to give you a bit of background on where this comes from, what we're actually doing, who we are as well. So I'll start with that. I'll briefly talk about who we are, what SC for All is, or Sustainable Energy for All. I'll touch on SDG 7 because it comes up quite often. SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goal. And then from there, I'll delve into the powering healthcare issue as well as opportunity. So first, who we are. SC for All is an international organization. We're essentially created as a UN initiative almost 8-9 years ago now, back when we still had the Millennium Development Goals, really with the understanding that we need to have more targeted action on energy. We need to have more targeted action on energy access, which means providing energy to those that do not have it. We need to have more efforts around energy efficiency. That means those who are using it, let's make sure that they use it more efficiently, as well as targeted action on renewable energy. So that means like where the power is actually coming from. And I think today we've already heard quite a bit about the importance of renewable energy. So I won't go too deep into that. But I do want to highlight Sustainable Development Goal 7, so which is that yellow square that you see, as one of our 2 North Stars at Sustainable Energy for All. The second one being the Paris Climate Agreement. So you'll see that the first North Star is much more about energy, especially with our key focus on energy access. The second one is more about climate and our role in the global space. So the first one is more international development. The second one is more on climate. So personally, my focus is more on the international development side. So that's what I'll focus most of my time on. But you'll see that I use the word renewable energy or solar or hydro or just energy in general quite often. And clearly the linkages with climate change are always there. But I wanted to present you with these numbers. And perhaps if you take just one thing away from this presentation, maybe it should be this. And that's the numbers on the left-hand side, which is today globally still almost 800 million people lack access to power at all. There's probably another billion or so that has access to enough power for maybe one light bulb, maybe enough power to charge a cell phone or to power a fan or a small device. But there's still just under a billion people who have no electricity access at all. And then just to make the bridge towards what the previous presentations, especially the first 2 presentations around climate, we still see a billion people globally that lack access to cooling. And with cooling, we mean cooling in terms of productive uses, cooling for food chains, cooling for medical cold chains, which is increasingly becoming important now with the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, but also just cooling for comfort, cooling in your houses in a rising climate. The importance of having access to cooling is much more a global concern than it is exclusively a concern for developing nations.
Luke,
yes,
you need to advance your slides.
Oh, can you not see that? Apologies for that. Let me try to get out. Can you tell me which slide you are seeing?
It says there are 789
Exactly.
million people without
Okay.
electricity.
I'll keep this one then. I'll keep this on just for another second. I'll keep it in this view because at least we know that you can see it then. I think once I start sharing my screen, it stops working. So just I'll let this up for another few seconds. Please absorb these numbers, especially the graph on the left. Still close to 1 billion people lack access to power at all. So in that sense, I also want to highlight this to ensure that we understand that it is not just about changing from coal to renewables or changing from dirty fuels to cleaner fuels. The challenge globally is made harder by this almost 1 billion people who also, of course, with population growth, this group is getting larger if we do nothing. This is not a target that just stands still. This is a group of people that we need to include into this clean energy transition as well. So as I already mentioned, powering healthcare is what I focus on most of my time within Sustainable Energy for All, and its main focus is around the provision of reliable power in health facilities. And I'm starting with the slide here on COVID-19 because it's really made it top of mind for many more people than ever before. The acknowledgement, the understanding of the importance of power in a health facility setting, be it in California, be it in a developing nation in sub-Saharan Africa or in Southeast Asia, the importance, especially today, of having a very strong medical cold chain, both on storage, on transport, and then on what we call point of service in terms of where the vaccines are delivered, are increasingly important, especially for the two vaccines that are being rolled out primarily right now, which is the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, that while they can be stored very briefly and for a matter of days at a more refrigeration temperature, in general, for longer term storage, they require freezing. And that's actually for the Pfizer vaccine, minus 70 degrees Celsius. For Moderna, it tends to be minus 20. So just to highlight how difficult it is, even in the US, even in Europe, to actually get that done, these challenges are exacerbated in countries that already do not have access to substantive amounts of power. And just to make the lack of energy that is available in many of these sub-Saharan African countries, as well as in Southeast Asia, just two little statistics that are maybe like little nuggets to throw out at your next cocktail party if we're ever able to meet in person again. The first one is, and I just looked this up, the state of California uses more power for gaming than the whole country of Ethiopia does on an annual basis, or the whole country of Kenya, or the whole country of Senegal. Just to show like the huge difference between an energy use and the massive gap that currently still exists, where these countries inevitably they are going to bridge that gap, but the amounts of resources and power that will be needed to get there are tremendous. And then the second little nugget is on match day, the stadium of the Dallas Cowboys uses more and generates and uses more power than the whole country of Liberia. And a couple of years ago, that was even an order of magnitude of 3. So just to show how much power sometimes we use, just as a message, but also how little power is actually available in many of the countries that we're trying to promote the uptake of renewable energies, just the uptake of energy in general, especially on the electrification side. So back with our focus on healthcare, I'll skip through this slide. You'll have it in the decks that will be sent to you. I do want to focus on health facilities and the importance of having reliable power. I hope most of you know this already, but it is important to be reminded that we use electricity in so many different parts of our daily life, but especially when we look at healthcare, from just the light that we need when a baby is born at night, from sterilizing the equipment, from our microscopes, any kind of device, from purifying water, for having any kind of heart monitoring or echocardiograms, and every single device basically requires electricity. Unfortunately, this is what healthcare very often looks like, especially in very rural areas in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia and Southeast Asia. So just to back this up with a few numbers, the most recent study showed that about 60%, so that's the 59% number that you currently see. So I'll just use 60% for ease. 60% of health facilities in low and middle income countries lack reliable power. So that means that's 6 in 10 have either no power or insufficient amount of power or unreliable power. And let's face it, unreliable power is not great. You do not want to have the power go out in the middle of a surgery or in the middle of giving birth. So it's a massive problem that affects basically 60% of health facilities, and this number basically is already, it presents a better picture than the reality, because the reality is we need to focus more on low income countries, on developing nations, where this number basically is the second number you see, goes to about 75%. So 3 in 4 clinics just lack reliable power, which is still a phenomenally high number. It's kind of shameful that we still are dealing with these numbers. If you look at the progress that we are globally making, many parts of the world are actually staying behind, and I feel like these numbers really back that up. In the interest of time, I'll just skip through to a little bit of good news, which is there are solutions. They have been deployed, especially on the renewable energy side. So these are health facilities and clinics that are very, very far from any kind of national grid. You take a country like Kenya or Uganda, and you talk about 30%, sometimes up to 50% of the population is connected to the national grid. So that means that more than half of the population is not connected to a national grid. Now, increasingly, we're seeing the deployment of initially more of these smaller solutions, small solar panel-based solutions that can be deployed quite quickly to these health facilities, as well as to households. And gradually, especially as costs have decreased of renewable energy solutions, we're seeing larger solutions being deployed. So we're seeing these little kiosks, container-based solutions, or we're seeing even microgrids up to the point of mini grids, which are essentially the same technology, the same type of deployment that we're seeing already in the US as well, in terms of independent or grid-connected mini grid solutions, typically based on solar PV with some kind of storage to be able to cover essential loads both during the day and during the night. But it's just to show that this is not necessarily a technical solution, a technical problem that we're trying to solve. The technology is out there. The problem is basically situated in all of these barriers here. And I'll just systematically go through them here. So the first one is actually, and this may sound silly, but this is actually the first big barrier that we're trying to fix, which is just knowing how big the problem is. Because I showed you some statistics in terms of 60% don't have reliable power, but those are estimations. Those are based on outdated data sets as well. It's very hard to understand and to really get accurate data on how many clinics are there in a particular country, what kind of power solutions do they have, what kind of power needs do they have, what kind of energy needs do they have, what kind of appliances do they have and need to power, what is their load profile over the course of a day or over the course of a week, which leads us to that second barrier of really understanding energy demand. And this is where it's getting quite exciting in the sense that we are using geospatial technology much more than before to actually try and map that out, to use machine learning, AI to actually capture like where these facilities are, how far from the grid they are, what would be the most appropriate technology to be deployed. The next set of barriers, though, are a little bit harder to cover, and that's especially the one on financing. So when we talk about this particular issue, it has been quite dominated by donors, by grants that are issued to procure a bunch of equipment, drop it at a clinic, and essentially you call it a day. Now we have seen, we have learned that lesson the hard way as a sector, that kind of model, while it works today and it works tomorrow, in the medium to long term, systems tend to fail. And they fail because one wire is loose, a battery is not charged properly, a fuse is not replaced. These are clinics that are essentially staffed by a nurse, a midwife, and a security guard. So it's also unreasonable to expect them to suddenly become like mini electricians. Even though these systems are progressively getting larger, getting more complicated, including software in addition to the hardware, to be able to really power all the appliances, to prioritize certain appliances over others. But that means that that shift from a very grant heavy model to a different type of approach has been very difficult in terms of how can you disperse the funds, how can you make sure that the clinics are electrified in a way that the batteries will be replaced, that the funds are available, as well as that the skills are available. And all that basically we capture under that big umbrella of sustainability. So the big question that we're all trying to solve is, how can we do this in a better way? And that is really the biggest challenge for us in this sector. It's not about finding the right technology to solve a problem. It's about finding the right model. So like finding the right actors to take this issue on. It's about finding the right de-risking mechanisms, finding the right type of funding and financing, and attracting private capital and impact investors, while at the same time making sure that there's perhaps even a rate of return, but also that the health outcomes, that they are always prioritized. So just a brief glimpse in terms of what we at Sustainable Energy for All are currently working on. And maybe perhaps what we're not working on, because we can't solve all these problems by ourselves. And I'll finish my presentation with one more slide to show you in terms of like who we're all partnering with. But very briefly, in terms of the activities that we're currently involved in and that we're leading, focusing, I'd say, on these three pillars. So starting with data and mapping, we are, as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of GIS, geospatial, least cost modeling, to better understand where these clinics are, how they can be best targeted, what the most appropriate solutions are, perhaps how many communities around them are they serving, can they be connected to a mini grid as well? That could perhaps help with the business model in terms of like how do you cross-subsidize the power used by a clinic, offering a public good, a subsidized public good, with, for example, more private consumption of electricity. We're also doing a lot of work around impact data. So the most straightforward way, which is kind of impossible, unfortunately, would be to say X amount of kilowatt hours saves you X amount of lives. So we can't do that because clearly there are so many different contextual layers. The environment around it plays such an important role that it's very hard to make any kind of causal direction between having power and saving lives. And also, it's not the power that saves lives, it's the nurses, it's the midwives, it's the health facility staff that does it, but they use the power to do so. So we are collecting a lot of data around quality of care, quality of health services, quantity of health services that can be offered once reliable power is in place, as well as health-seeking behavior and patient and staff satisfaction, to better capture and to be able to make a bit of a business case that is not necessarily a financial one, but to show that for every dollar that you invest in health facility electrification, these are the benefits that you can see in terms of vaccination rates, in terms of the number of women that give birth in a health facility rather than at home, just to highlight two of the main impact areas that we see. Then on advocacy and comms, we are always heavily involved with advocacy, especially at the global level, as an organization that essentially came out of the UN. So we still leverage that UN link quite heavily. We're always involved at the UN General Assembly. This year, actually, towards the end of the year, is the first high-level dialogue on energy, the first one since the 80s when there was the oil crisis. So another big spotlight where we will make sure that this topic, especially given that we're in, in the COVID-19 world, that this topic is prioritized and hopefully attracts a lot of funding, a lot of pledges, a lot of a lot more action. Because I'd say that in the last year we've seen a big increase in momentum. We haven't seen a lot of increase in action. So a lot of interest from key organizations, which I'll scroll to in a second. But the action part, that's really our big objective now is making sure that this actually results in making a big dent in this energy gap in the health sector. And then one of the most practical, tangible ways that we do that is through this third pillar of country advisory work, where in a handful of countries, we are actively working with ministries of health, ministries of energy, ministries of finance, as well as their development partners. So think of UN agencies, think of the World Bank, think of the African Development Bank. Also think on the health side, right? Organizations like WHO or Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, basically bringing everybody together under this one national umbrella, doing much more country level coordination, developing essentially what we're calling powering healthcare roadmaps to identify the size of the gap, the cost implications, the most appropriate solutions, the most appropriate models to actually close this gap once and for all. And we're doing this both just at a national level as well as with a sub-focus on COVID-19, given that this is really a key priority today for all these countries that are struggling, first and foremost, of course, to get access to vaccines, which we know is a problem. And then secondly, to actually distribute them by ensuring a medical cold chain, by making sure that they have the power in place to actually keep them at the necessary temperature for a prolonged time, not just in the central capital, but also in storage as well as in the rural areas where the majority of people still live. So I'll end with this slide, just a grasp of some of the organizations that we're currently partnering with. I think I always try to include in these presentations that we're never alone. Alone, we can do nothing. We always need to work in partnership. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. That's kind of our motto. So we're partnering both on the public side with private sector actors as well. We're partnering with energy folks. We're partnering with the health folks to really make sure that this is we say that this is an intersectoral problem, and to really solve it, you need to have an intersectoral solution. So I'll end with that, and I'll hand it back to GP here. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke, for an excellent presentation. And since we are behind the schedule, I will defer the question to the next session, the panel discussion. So, so this is the time to introduce the next panel discussion session. Who will be the moderator of the session is Dr. Joy Pixley. Joy specialized in human subject research methods, such as the surveys and field tests. She studied how users affect energy outcome for plug-load devices and how to improve user behavior through better device design, user experience analysis, and feedback intervention. She is currently the research director of CalPlug. Joy, please take away. And inviting all the panelists back.
GP,
Yes.
I believe you are moderating, not Joy. Joy, unfortunately, has had a very bad reaction to her COVID shot. The second shot, she is under the weather. Did you not get her email this morning?
I did not read all the email. I'm sorry. And so do we have Anne and Ewan?
There.
Yes. Welcome back. So let me start with some of the questions before we dive into how we take action together. Some of the questions from the previous presentation. One is related to the Luke's presentation. We talk about the technology as a part of the solution, as well as fundraising, needed the funding, and to really support that needed build up infrastructure. And another piece of the equation is people, right? So we do need to have a well-trained engineers who can really support their infrastructures. So what is from NGO point of view, how you can really support their efforts to, just like in the US, we focus on STEM recruitment to encourage more people to go into the STEM field so that they can be the one behind the infrastructure to maintain the infrastructure, right, for the long-term needs. So what is the take from your viewpoint?
It's a fun question. It's a good one because it's, yeah, I kind of alluded to it when I said it's unrealistic to ask a nurse to become an electrician or to take up the tasks of an electrician. So increasingly, we're seeing these larger solutions being deployed that require much more maintenance as well, or at least, you know, like some kind of management in terms of like making sure that the batteries are charged, making sure that the power goes to the right places. And that's where what I refer to when I said these systems have more software than before. Before it was, there were like small plug and play kits, and then you could install, like IKEA could sell them, that kind of model. Right now we're seeing bigger solutions that require more skills. The positive viewpoint is that many of these countries have increasingly mature what we call energy access private sector. So there are a lot of small, both international but especially nationally owned, nationally run companies in countries like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda that are essentially like selling solar. They're selling solar home systems. They're just deploying mini grids. They're operating them. They're visiting them very often. So they're quite deep into the field. They have sales agents everywhere. They have repair technicians very deep into the rural areas. And increasingly, with the with the advent of mobile phone technology and especially mobile phone coverage really improving, the majority of these larger systems actually can be accessed remotely. So it means that you're suddenly reducing the need for O&M, for like operating and maintenance, and for really visiting these sites very often. You're reducing it significantly because you can essentially run a lot of tests and do a lot of troubleshooting when you have a laptop, regardless of where you're based, even in the world, as long as that one system is connected through a GPRS system or a 3G system, you can access those systems. Now, the one thing that you will never be able to do remotely is clean the dust from the solar panel. So that is really a task that, especially in, like, when you think of sub-Saharan Africa, you think these areas tend to be quite dusty, do not necessarily have very regular rain to clean, to wash away the dust from the panels. So this is an area, and that's the last thing I'll say, is these are the types of like smaller tasks that are perhaps not necessarily where you need somebody with a STEM degree, but you do need somebody to actually do it. And this is where, because it's at a health facility, we tend to involve the communities that are around it, the communities that rely on these health facilities to ensure that, you know, they bring some small funds together, or at the very least they have somebody dedicated in the community who can monitor, who can patrol, who make sure that, you know, the kids around are not playing soccer just next to the solar panels, that nobody, you know, or just to prevent it from theft. You know, that those are just common issues that may happen, that you know, like you work with the community, you sensitize the community, you mobilize the communities around it, as well as the people in the health facility, to ensure that what you're doing is also used appropriately, that your intervention is adopted. But that includes some of these smaller tasks that need to happen. And yeah, I always say there's no such thing as zero maintenance. There will always be a little bit of maintenance. So we need to be aware of that, because if we pretend that it's zero maintenance, we basically end up in the situation that way too many organizations and interventions have ended up in, which is a really nice, flashy, big, expensive installation stops working simply because a fuse breaks, like a $1 fuse. And this is exactly what we need to avoid. And this is very avoidable, but you need to plan for it well in advance rather than try and address it later on.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the answer. Now let's start this panel discussion. So we have heard all of you are presenting. We all share the same goal, to save the planet, our Mother Earth. But we can get siloed in our own particular area as researchers, regulators, utility advocacy group, or community organization, local versus national and global issues. So what are some ways this group could more effectively work together to make more progress? For example, can you offer any examples of cross-pollination that has worked well, a great case study or approach to share with us? Who would like to take a cut first? Anne?
Sure. So when we were lifting up Sonoma Clean Power, that's our version of community choice energy in Sonoma County, we made a very concerted effort to not just get the same old suspects, to go for the wineries, to go for the business groups, to go for the chambers of commerce, to go for churches, and to reach out to organizations that wouldn't necessarily be considered a supporter of this green energy solution. And we wanted to make it universal. So on our, what we called our Friends of Sonoma Clean Power, we made sure that we had, it's almost a little bit like Noah's Ark, you know, one here, one here, one here, one here, so that we would have balance to show that it was a universally sought solution for Sonoma Clean Power, and that worked really, really well. I don't know if that GP is what you're looking for, but that was an example for us that worked to break down those silos.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Yeah, I would just, reframe what I presented this morning on the Kretz Innovation Campus and the Clean Tech Incubator as a similar example of pulling together a diverse set of stakeholders and a diverse set of interests. Obviously, it's a clean tech incubator. Job creation is very important. Skill job creation, like I mentioned, we bring students through it all the time to give them a sense and perhaps hopefully an interest in the topic of sustainability, energy, water efficiency, and see, potentially see a future in that industry, whether it's with LEDWP or with one of the companies that's there. We have an extensive industry connection, a series of connections through the incubator. I mentioned that NREL has a presence there. Also, the trades, the IBW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and code organizations. I mentioned IAPMO, plumbing officials, mechanical and plumbing officials, and then we have a lot of community groups that are very interested. We have a number of community grantees that help us with the grassroots to get the message out across the city through the council districts, and we convene them all the time and typically at the Kretz, and so they stay up on the latest of what's being developed as well. So, and that's just the start of it. Just the tip of the iceberg. How much coordination we're able to do for that facility.
Thank you. And
I wanted to add, I think that was good, by the way. I wanted to add that I think it starts with a point of view. And the point of view that we've adopted is no blame, no shame, we're all in this together. And I think that stance helps create an openness for dialogue and for working together.
thank you. Evan?
Yeah, I'll echo some of the prior remarks. I would say, right, so there's a lot of activities that go on in what I do and what Edison does broadly in various teams, right, in various organizations or sub-organizations. in my role as emerging technologies lead, we interact with startup companies, we interact with firsthand with trade organizations or trade groups or trade or the trades themselves, and showing the pathways to making these sort of connections to what they're doing is very difficult. There is an economic interest, there is an economic motivator that is that drive these folks to do or not do certain things. And that's a big challenge. But through these connections, these experimentations, these demonstrations, field work that we do, we do that. We also work through, sort of regulators. We work through stakeholder groups more broadly in other parts of the organization. We bring together multiple points of view, and we also work through the codes process, right? If I can bold enough to expand into that area, there's a lot of effort, great effort being done to work with the interest groups to align those policies and actual actionable plans along that sort of broad stakeholder group, and how to and so it's a very difficult thing. I focus on a very narrow part of that. It does represent. It's a big challenge. But at the same time, you have to start somewhere, right? And in our case, it's really starting with the technologies that we want to see deployed. We want to walk the talk as employees, as citizens, and we also want to we also want to educate people that we touch in the course of doing our individual work, to explain and educate and talk in terms that they can understand, right? In terms that they can process, that they can relate to them, and show that there is value, not just environmental value, not just environmental motivators, but there's also economic value to helping transform our economy.
Thank you. Yanni, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I have just one quick learning to share. So coming from a very different perspective, for-profit tech company, what we have found, and echoing something that I heard Luke say earlier, is, there's a lot of talk, but we need action. And what we have seen is that action often comes when there is some serious form of public commitment, oftentimes through an alliance or advisory board, something like that. And we have partaken in that a couple of times on a long-term basis, which is what I was emphasizing in my talk, is that none of this is a short-term, hey, it's Earth Day, come buy clothes here, right? It's a long-term analysis of how your organization is impacting the environment and what your responsibility is. And so if you can join an alliance or create one with many different types of organizations and people with different experiences, you end up having quite a bit of impact, because there are all of these different perspectives that when they feel welcome and included, like Anne said, you can make really big change. So we've seen that be the most impactful way to keep our company moving forward.
Thank you. I have a question, especially to utility and also related to Luke. What I know, LADWP is serving larger LA area territory. You have more than 3 million customers. SE is serving SoCal, including Orange County. You have about 11 million customers. And do you share any playbook? Because these two business models are very, very different. One is a municipal utility. The other one is IOU, right? It has a different business model, and looks in Africa's effort is a very, very different social entrepreneur business model. And I do believe the direction is we are seeing more integration of green energy resources moving in a direction as distributed energy generation, very similar, right? So how do you share those successful experience and the method to implementation and how to train the future workforce so
Yeah,
that they can champion?
I'll take a stab at that one, Dr. Lee.
So who would like to take this questions?
I'll start out with that one if you don't mind, Dr. Lee.
Yes,
So
yes,
I've worked for both Edison and LADWP. Spent about 9 years
please.
at 9.5 years at Edison and almost 9 years now at DWP. I can tell you, for the most, other than investor owned versus publicly owned, we're much more similar than we are different. We both have the same constraints, the same interests. We're all about safe, affordable, reliable energy. We're trying to decarbonize our grid just as Edison is. We run into very much the same challenges. As a result, we work closely together. The major statewide utilities, inclusive of Edison, SDG, PG&E, us, and SMUD, and this is on the electric side. The gas company is also part of some of these teams. But we work very closely together. We have a number of statewide programs that we all contribute to, codes and standards, emerging technologies. So we're coordinating, and the point of that is we all have resources for example, let me give emerging technologies because that's really germane to this event today. Rather than have each utility pursuing its own emerging technologies in a vacuum, and we might, in that scenario, we might both be exploring the same technology, not knowing the other one is. That's a waste of resources, a waste of customer resources. So we coordinate a statewide program where we have a team that meets, and every few months or once a year, we go run down a list of potential studies, and then we assign them out. Okay, SMUD, you look at this one. Edison, you look at that one. DWP, you explore that one. And then we come back together and share all that information. We share those studies, the results, the work papers. We have the California Technical Forum, which is specifically set up to help a uniform approach to work paper development. We're part of that. So there's a lot of statewide coordination that goes on between the major utilities.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add just a couple more things. Thanks, David. I mean, that was pretty comprehensive, really. The only thing I'll add is that there are some differences. Obviously, our oversight is different. We have a public utility commission that oversees a lot of our work and a lot of our priorities in terms of the program, and our customer-facing programs are driven and heavily influenced by that process. But along the way, right, all this collaboration, all this good work, all the alignment that we're finding in the work that we're doing, it's really a tremendous thing, right? That we're able to directly contribute in some very specific ways to the path that the California sort of vision has laid out for us, and be able to put out some very specific actionable goals and actionable path to achieving and contributing to that outcome. It makes it a much real and much more precise way of how we contribute to it. So from technologies that we're evaluating right now that are in the kind of incubation state, all the way to programs that are kind of launching and making a larger impact in support of these goals. It's very nice to see that clear line. So it's about really how to make those things happen, right? So the obstacles are for us to create and to overcome along that path. And I think we have good support from Governor Newsom to legislative action to our regulators, and LADWP's board, I'm sure, is just in the same way aligned with these priorities and supportive.
Thank you. Okay, so I have another question is when I listened to Yanni's talk about the joint effort with the National Forest Association, right? So, National Park, sorry. So at the same time, we know the wildfire impact our grid resilience, right? So is there any way you can have a joint force with the utilities and to really create a game in the national park and identify the area we need to clean up and to make a system more robust. And at the same time, they may take a photo of those transmission line somewhere need to be fixed. As a citizen, to provide some of the overseeing, spying the infrastructure for utilities so that we are better prepared. Is there any course of action you can team up and find a solution for us?
No, definitely. As Jenny was presenting this, I was thinking, my wheels were turning. So I don't know of anything myself that sort of crowdsources this sort of information in support of this. Obviously, we're installing sophisticated equipment in remote locations. Weather stations, monitoring wind patterns. We're monitoring physical sort of conditions, et cetera, right, in all these critical areas of high danger. So it's an interesting proposition, right, I'm a hiker, right, so I go out there in areas that are, and I'm always, obviously, as a utility employee, watching and looking at wires overhead and all this stuff, and you see infrastructure of all type, right, you see old infrastructure, you see crazy infrastructure, things. But there is a robust inspection plan. There's drones that are being utilized now. But it's an interesting idea. I mean, I think this is more of a grassroots. The way I look at it, right? If I can just top of mind think about how this can be helpful. I think it'd be helpful in all the ways that you mentioned, GP. But very important is really the engagement of citizens and customers to rally them behind these sort of causes. And I think what Jenny and her organization is doing, I think sounds like something that is definitely could be of interest to some of our programs. I'm not in the kind of a customer facing side. I'm a customer service person, but I'm not customer facing necessarily. There are some key initiatives that might be benefit from these sort of social gaming. I've thought about these social gaming for years and how they could support our work. I mean, the emergence of gaming has definitely transformed our society, I would say, generally. So certainly we need to leverage it as well. And there's a lot of opportunity there, I think, that is untapped.
Yeah, Yanni, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, well, I have some ideas. As I mentioned at the end of my presentation, we are building out a platform that will enable really any third-party developer to create applications for the smartphone and probably someday in the future, glasses and that sort of thing that applies directly to this. I do think that when you engage citizens in ways that are interesting and exciting to them and kind of hand over some of the ownership of their own community, that they're much more likely to engage. So for example, in Pokemon Go, players have to walk to art sculptures and fountains and historical buildings in order to interact with the game. We're now testing out features in which the player can scan the, let's say, art sculpture to get a better sense of the 360 view of that monument. And then in the future, we could say, well, could we assess whether or not, there's been damage done to that monument and then send it to the appropriate organization that manages that. There are quite a few very small apps that allow citizens to track things like broken curbs. And of course, here in San Francisco, we've got an app where you can record trash and needles and all the things. So I think we're getting there, but I think it's it's on tech companies like Niantic to make sure that the platforms are available for organizations and researchers and designers that are interested in this kind of thing.
Thank you. Thank you. So
Can't hear you.
here we have
I think GP is running into bandwidth issues.
question is
Uh-oh.
You're
this
coming
is
in.
also in addition to organizations. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think turn off your camera. I think it's working better. Go
You're
ahead.
shaky.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yeah, my wife is using using up all the bandwidth. So now you can hear me. So we have a question here. Can you hear me now?
No.
Maybe he can type
You
it.
still cannot hear me?
We hear you now, GP. It's just jittery.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Oh,
Okay.
dear.
So because in today's workshop, we talk about everyone can take actions. Right? So how can everyday people who are not part of this group to best support this large effort to make our planet great again, So how can we all do our own part in everyday life, not just at home, but at work, school, community center, club, places of workshop, and so on. So do you have any thought for the audience to think about as a loyal citizen, how we can contribute to this mission? And
I'd like to, yeah, I'll answer that question. And I'll quote Bill McKibben, who's one of the foremost climate experts for, how do we deal with this? And he said, the question I get asked the most when I go around the world is, what can I do? And he said, it's the wrong question, which I went, what? He said, it's the wrong question. The right question is, what can we do? And I think that was your point, GP, because these big structures and systems that have caused global climate change have to be addressed in a big way in order to make the sweeping speed and scale changes that are needed in time to hit the scientific imperative, as we talked about in the science, that's showing us that the impacts are speeding up. So that's why in the presentation that I made, we talked about policy, and people can really make a difference in policy. And so my hope is that people will feel empowered to be engaged at that level and join with others in order to communicate with our policymakers that these changes are needed and we need to accelerate. So there's certainly lots of things that we can do in our lives, but they will not add up to the speed and scale changes that we need to make in order to address the climate crisis.
anyone else? Luke, any suggestion?
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with Anne. you know, we compost, we recycle, and I know like all together it's just it's marginal, but it is important as well. And I think all these small things, they do add up to something, even though it's not sufficient in the grand scheme of things. So I think in addition to that, I think it's upon all of us to be good citizens, to be informed, especially like, inform yourselves, just know what's happening, know what's out there. You know, as you say, you know, vote with your feet, you know, like, and go buy the products that you know are more sustainable, and speak out against the organizations that you feel are not doing their part. Like switch providers, like these things, if it's one person, they probably don't matter, but if it's a bunch of people, it does matter. And I think we, like in the last couple of years, we have seen the power of a movement, you know, like, and the power of movement, especially one that's driven by youth. I think that's one that we should not underestimate. How, you know, like, as a collective voice, how strong it can be. So I'd say, yeah, that would be my kind of like my 2 cents here.
I would take it to a personal point of view and a kind of a industry. At a personal level, it's about engaging with nature, engaging with the environment that we want to protect, and eating habits, I think, are critical, right? Eat, you know, reduce your beef intake, your meat intake as much as possible. It has a tremendous impact on your health, and I think definitely on the environment. Very impactful. Into the planet, right? Deforestation and all sorts of other implications associated with not thinking about food resources or food sources. Again, at a personal level, really, you know, walking the talk. But you know, I like to you know, offset my carbon when I like to you know, drive my electric car as much as I can, push it to the limit. These are like, you know, first world sort of issues, right? It's not addressing third world or the rest of the world, but this is what I can do. So it's sort of what I can do in my own life. And I would say broadly enough, you know, look at those things. Look at the technologies that we're thinking are going to benefit. Think about solar. Think about the possibility, if you have the ability to do that, you know, solar, electric transportation, public transportation, and look at these other. If you own a home, if you own a home, look at electrifying some of these appliances. We think that's the best path forward to electrify and limit combustions locally by reducing, you know, water heating and local water heating and local space heating emissions.
Thank you. So I have a question to all your panelists. Do you have a question for each others, and you like to see what are the action you can engage with others? Any question for each other? Please go ahead. And
I'd like to know from the other panelists, what gives you hope?
Well,
I'll go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, I mean, you know, and I really liked what you said about Bill McKibben's quote, because that's exactly it. You know, the hope comes from us all being here, working together, working across industries. I love the fact that we actually have, you know, essentially 3 very different business models of utilities on this: the CCA, the IOU, the POU. We're kind of a we're you know, kind of a, what would you say, vertically integrated CCA that exercised that option in 1925 or so to take over Edison's power lines in the city. But yet here we all are.
Don't you call yourselves MUDs?
Well, yeah, POU, there's a number of, you know, there's terms for it. But the point is, we're all here. I mean, that's where the hope comes from, is that, you know, whatever this might be happening at other levels of the organization, or organizations, which between us and Edison, there's no there's no bad blood of any sort anymore. But that's the hope, is that we've got utilities, community groups, industry, regulators, policymakers, all recognize the issues here, the urgency, and the need to do something about it as soon as possible, and be actively working on it right now.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's an important question, honestly, to ask ourselves every day, because hope drives all of this. I think it's the youth, honestly. I mean, you all have said it earlier, is they really are the driving force behind a lot of action. We're a part of an alliance called Raising Good Gamers, and youth are a big part of that alliance and advisory board. And it's a fascinating experience to just watch them utilize the knowledge and experiences that they've all accumulated in their own lives and use it for power. So we think that that's pretty amazing, and we hope that we can help support those efforts.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I think we are approaching towards the end of today's workshop. So before we end the session, I want to ask every one of you the last takeaway you want to leave the audience with. Who would like to start with? Your takeaway message.
I'll go ahead.
Yes.
We can and we must.
Thank you.
I will just simply second that. I think that's very succinct and really brings it home.
I would say look outside your bubble and continue to educate yourself and surround yourself with people of different experiences and ideas.
Yeah, it's going to take a village, right? And surrounding yourself, to your kind of riffing off of Jenny's point, right, it's not going to be sufficient to just surround yourself with like-minded individuals that think the same way. I think we need to figure out a way to talk to everyone. So yeah, so saying messages that resonate with me to people that doesn't resonate with them is not very helpful. So we need to figure out a way to speak collectively to each other.
Yeah, I think just to echo what everybody has said, like, yeah, just listen to each other, learn from each other. Not one person has all the answers. So we all have to rely on each other. But I think what matters most is that these problems have solutions. Sometimes we don't know them yet. We don't have all of them yet, but we will get them. And we do have, and like, be it now with COVID-19 or be it with any other, like with the forest fires, like they're always, we can always flip them and turn them into opportunities for action. But there's one big risk, which is that we don't. So I think that's maybe my one point of caution, is take these opportunities and turn them into action, because it's very easy to let them slip, and then we'll have to wait for the next one.
Thank you. So it's about to conclude today's event. My takeaway from all of your great presentation is we have to keep our hope alive. When we work together, we should be able to solve the problem. And how we do that? We innovate and we engage, we communicate, and sort out the difference and find a unified solution which can be accepted by the majority of communities. And when we work together, it's not just locally, but also globally, and share all the knowledge and experience as a way to promote the future success. And that's what I take away from all your presentation. And in the process of doing that, we understand there is a major piece of the governments or the world leader. Now, I believe they are playing their role, doing the right thing for all of us. And they should appreciate, they need to adopt some of the policy from all of us. And that is the way we can really find a unified solution for our Mother Earth. And that is the way I really appreciate all of you for your contribution to this success of the workshop. And I also want to thank all the audience for your participation until the last minutes of the today's workshop. So please continue in contact with us. And whenever you have any idea, share with us. And we will be the one to pass along the information and share with the larger audience. And let's move forward. Let's act and be a great person. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.